It's wonderful to have you here tonight. There is a part of your brain that has been awake even longer than you realize, quietly watching, waiting, wondering when you'll finally allow it to rest. Tonight, you'll discover what your brain is actually doing when you can't sleep, and understand why struggling with sleep might be one of the most human things there is. Welcome to Sleepy Mind Science. Wherever you are right now, perhaps lying in the quiet dark, your thoughts still reaching for the day behind you, allow yourself this pause. Your body is already trying to help you. We'll journey through 100 sleep science facts about the resting mind. From the ancient chemical messengers that build your need for sleep, to the hidden architecture of your dreams, to the curious intelligence of the brain that simply cannot stop. These quiet journeys through sleep science build a community of minds that understand rest is not weakness, but wisdom. A gentle like, subscribe, or sharing this with someone who stares at the ceiling at night creates a pathway for more sleepless souls to discover and brings us closer to protect this peaceful space. One sleepy soul at a time. Your presence here is felt, and it means the world to us. Settle deeper into wherever you're resting now. Let your shoulders release. Let your jaw loosen just slightly. You don't need to hold on to any of the facts that follow. Just let them arrive like soft sounds through an open window. Present, then passing, then gone. Sense that calm heaviness beginning to move through you, like your thoughts dimming one by one, each breath carrying you a little further from the day. Close your eyes and breathe deeply. You're in the quiet space where the thinking mind finally softens its hold. Let your mind dissolve into the gentle rhythm of your own breath, into the stillness that has always been here, waiting. And now we begin. The human brain never fully switches off. Even now, as you rest in the dark, billions of neurons are firing, communicating, organizing, maintaining the delicate balance of your entire living system. Sleep is not an absence of brain activity. It is a different kind of activity. Researchers who study the sleeping brain using devices that measure electrical signals have found that during certain sleep stages, the brain is nearly as active as when you are wide awake. What changes is not the volume of activity, but the purpose. Wakefulness is for taking in the world. Sleep is for making sense of it. The brain you carry tonight is not resting. It is working quietly on your behalf, in ways that daylight hours simply cannot allow. Sleep is one of the most ancient behaviors in the animal kingdom. Scientists have observed sleep-like states in jellyfish, which do not even have a brain, in flies, in fish, in birds, in whales. Every creature that has a nervous system appears to spend part of its existence in a state of reduced responsiveness that looks very much like sleep. This deep evolutionary heritage suggests that sleep is not a quirk or a vulnerability. It is a fundamental requirement woven into the biology of living things. Whatever sleep does for the body and mind, it has been doing it for hundreds of millions of years, long before there were beds, before there was language, before there was anything recognizable as worry. Humans spend roughly 1/3 of their lives asleep. For a person who lives to 80 years of age, that adds up to more than 26 years spent sleeping. When you first encounter that number, it can feel like a loss. All those hours, all that time. But researchers who study what happens to the brain and body during those years understand it differently. Sleep is not time subtracted from living. It is what makes living possible. Without it, The other two-thirds collapse into fog, into irritability, into the slow erosion of everything we call cognition, creativity, and emotional steadiness. The biological drive for sleep is built from a chemical called adenosine. From the moment you wake up each morning, this molecule begins to accumulate in your brain. As the hours pass, its concentration rises. You feel it as fatigue, that gentle, growing heaviness that appears in the afternoon, deepens in the evening, and eventually becomes irresistible. Adenosine binds to receptors in parts of the brain associated with arousal and begins, slowly and steadily, to quiet them. The scientific term is sleep pressure. The subjective experience is what brought you here tonight. Your brain has been building toward this moment all day long. Caffeine works by mimicking the shape of adenosine well enough to occupy the same receptor sites, but without triggering their sleep-promoting effects. This is why a cup of coffee in the morning feels like clarity restored. The adenosine is still accumulating, still building pressure, but its signal is temporarily blocked. When the caffeine is eventually metabolized, usually over 5 to 6 hours, all that accumulated adenosine rushes back in at once. Scientists sometimes call this the caffeine crash. The sleepiness was always there. It was simply waiting. There are two overlapping systems that govern when you sleep. The first is that adenosine-driven buildup of sleep pressure, a homeostatic process, meaning it responds directly to how long you have been awake. The second is the circadian rhythm, an internal biological clock located deep in the brain, in a small region called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which runs on a cycle of roughly 24 hours. These two systems work together like two conductors in a quiet conversation. When they are aligned, sleep comes easily. When they are out of sync, from late nights, from shift work, from crossing time zones, the conversation becomes confused, and sleep grows difficult. The circadian clock takes its cues primarily from light. Specialized cells in the back of the eyes detect not just brightness, but the specific quality of light, particularly blue wavelengths present in daylight and, more recently, in the glow of screens. When these cells register light in the evening, they send a signal that delays the release of melatonin, the hormone that begins the biological preparation for sleep. Research has suggested that evening light exposure, especially from devices, can push melatonin release back by as much as 40 minutes or more. This is not a character flaw. It is a physiological response to an environment our biology did not evolve to expect. Melatonin is often called the sleep hormone, but that description is slightly incomplete. Melatonin is more accurately a signal of darkness, a chemical messenger produced by the pineal gland that tells your body night has arrived. It does not directly cause sleep the way a sedative would. Instead, it lowers alertness, relaxes blood vessels, slightly reduces body temperature, and prepares the biological terrain for sleep to occur naturally. Its rise in the bloodstream is one of the first signs that your body is shifting into the orientation of rest, a slow, biochemical turning toward the night. Body temperature plays a key role in initiating sleep. In the hours before you fall asleep, your core temperature naturally begins to fall. Blood is redirected toward the skin and away from the core, which is why your hands and feet may feel warm, even when the room is cool. This heat release is part of the mechanism. A drop of just 1 or 2 degrees Fahrenheit in core temperature is part of what allows sleep onset to happen. This is one reason a warm bath or shower before bed, counterintuitively, can help some people fall asleep more easily. The warm water draws blood to the surface. When you step out, the evaporation accelerates the cooling, nudging the body toward its sleep preparation state. Sleep unfolds in stages, cycling through the night in a rhythm that researchers have been studying since the 1950s. There are broadly 2 types: non-rapid eye movement sleep, known as NREM, and rapid eye movement sleep, known as REM. Within NREM, there are 3 stages, designated N1, N2, and N3, each progressively deeper. Together, these stages repeat roughly every 90 minutes throughout the night. NREM accounts for approximately 3/4 of total sleep time, with REM making up most of the rest. What the brain is doing in each stage, and why the ordering matters, is one of the most intriguing questions in neuroscience today, and one we'll explore gently through the next several facts. N1, the first and lightest stage of sleep, is the threshold between wakefulness and rest. It typically lasts just 1 to 7 minutes. This is the stage where the hypnic jerk occurs, that sudden, brief contraction of the muscles that sometimes jolts you awake just as you're beginning to drift. Researchers have several theories for why it happens. One idea is that it reflects the nervous system transitioning between states, a momentary recalibration as muscle tone drops and the brain adjusts. Another theory, popular though still speculative, suggests it may echo an ancient reflex from our tree-dwelling ancestors. However it arises, it is normal, experienced by most people at some point, and it means your body was almost there. N2 is the stage of sleep most people are in for the largest portion of their night, roughly half of total sleep time. The brain produces a distinctive pattern in this stage, short bursts of rapid, rhythmic activity called sleep spindles, and larger slow waves called K-complexes. Sleep spindles are thought to play a role in filtering out sensory information, essentially guarding the deeper stages of sleep from disruption. They may also be involved in memory consolidation. Some researchers have found that people with more sleep spindles during the night perform better on certain learning tasks the following day. The sleeping brain is not passive. It is actively protecting your ability to think. N3 is the deepest stage of NREM sleep, sometimes called slow-wave sleep. It is characterized by large, slow electrical waves moving across the brain in a synchronized tide. In this stage, your body is most difficult to wake. Your heart rate and breathing are at their slowest, and growth hormone is released in significant quantities. This is the stage most associated with physical restoration, the repair of tissues, the consolidation of muscle, the clearing of metabolic byproducts. Children and adolescents spend far more time in 3 than adults do. As we age, this deep restorative stage gently diminishes. One of the quieter changes that comes with aging is the gradual shift away from the most rebuilding hours of the night. REM, sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, is the stage most associated with vivid dreaming. During REM, the brain becomes nearly as active as during waking, but voluntary muscles fall into a state of near paralysis. This paralysis is a protective mechanism. It prevents you from physically acting out your dreams. The eyes move rapidly beneath closed lids, suggesting the brain is tracking visual scenes that exist only in the interior world. For a long time, researchers focused heavily on the idea that REM sleep was uniquely tied to dream memory processing. More recent research continues to explore its relationship not just to memory but to emotional regulation, creativity, and the way the brain resets its emotional tone for the day ahead. The distribution of sleep stages changes across the night in a way most people do not realize. In the first half of the night, N3 slow wave sleep dominates. Deep, physically restorative sleep comes first. In the second half of the night, the balance tips toward longer stretches of REM. This architecture is not arbitrary. It appears to reflect two different kinds of overnight work the brain prioritizes in a specific order. Physical and cellular repair first, then memory, emotional processing, and psychological integration second. When we cut sleep short, waking early, staying up late, we disproportionately lose REM sleep, robbing ourselves not just of time but of the specific work that happens only in those later hours. Memory consolidation is one of sleep's most documented functions. While you sleep, the brain moves information acquired during the day from temporary storage in the hippocampus to more stable regions of the cortex. This transfer appears to happen primarily during N2 and N3. Think of it as the brain filing the day's experiences into longer-term storage, compressing what is worth keeping and gently releasing what can be let go. Research has found that people who sleep between a learning session and a memory test perform measurably better than those who remain awake during the same interval. Sleep does not just preserve memories. In some sense, it completes them. Dreams may serve a related but different function. During REM sleep, the brain is not simply replaying memories. It is also combining them in non-obvious ways, creating connections between experiences that waking logic would not easily make. Some researchers have described dreaming as a kind of overnight processing, a way of revisiting emotional content in a neurochemical environment that is unusually gentle for doing so. During REM, levels of norepinephrine, a stress-related chemical, fall significantly, possibly allowing the brain to revisit difficult experiences without re-triggering the full emotional charge they originally carried. This is, by nature, a still evolving area of science. But the idea that sleep shapes how we feel about our memories is increasingly supported by evidence. The glymphatic system is one of the more recent discoveries in sleep neuroscience. It is a network of fluid-carrying channels in the brain, dependent on supporting cells called glia, that researchers believe functions somewhat like a drainage system for the central nervous system. During certain stages of sleep, this system may play a more active role, moving cerebrospinal fluid through the brain's interstitial spaces in ways that help clear metabolic waste products, including proteins associated with neurodegenerative conditions. The exact mechanics of how and when this clearance occurs remain an active area of investigation, with recent research continuing to refine the picture. What remains consistent is the broader idea that the sleeping brain performs a kind of maintenance that waking activity cannot easily accommodate. The brain under sleep deprivation does not simply slow down uniformly. It begins to respond differently in specific, predictable ways. The prefrontal cortex, the region most associated with planning, judgment, and impulse regulation, is among the first to show reduced function. At the same time, the amygdala, the brain's alarm system, becomes more reactive under sleep loss. It responds to perceived threats with greater intensity and is less effectively regulated by the higher regions that would normally provide context and proportion. A brain that is tired does not simply slow down. It becomes more sensitive to the world around it, responding more readily to perceived difficulty, finding it harder to hold perspective. This is not a flaw. It is simply the nervous system doing its best with what it has. A 2025 study published in the journal eBiomedicine, drawing on brain imaging data from a large international cohort, found that people who slept poorly showed measurable differences in brain structure compared to those with healthy sleep, differences that mirrored what would be expected in people several years older. Poor sleep, in other words, was associated not just with how the brain functions day to day, but with its physical architecture over time. The connection between sleep quality and long-term brain health is one of the most active and meaningful areas in neuroscience today. Chronic insomnia, defined in research settings as difficulty sleeping at least 3 days a week for 3 months or more, is one of the most prevalent conditions in modern life. Depending on how it is measured, somewhere between 10 and 20% of adults in any given population meet criteria for an insomnia disorder. Many more experience periodic or situational sleep difficulty. Insomnia is, in a meaningful sense, the mind's most common complaint, more widespread than most people realize, and more understood than most people have been told. Recent neuroscience research has proposed a thoughtful model for understanding why some people are more inclined toward insomnia than others. The model suggests that insomnia may originate not in the systems that directly regulate sleep timing, the circadian clock, the homeostatic pressure, but in the brain circuits that regulate emotion and arousal. Specifically, a region called the locus coeruleus, which produces norepinephrine and plays a central role in alertness, may be more easily activated in people prone to insomnia, and may remain partially active even during sleep stages when it would normally go quiet. The experience people often describe as sleeping with one eye open has a neurological correlate. The brain's alarm system is simply more sensitive. Hyperarousal is a term researchers use to describe a state of elevated physiological and cognitive activation that persists in people with insomnia across the 24-hour day, not just at night. People with chronic insomnia often show elevated heart rates, higher body temperatures, more active stress hormone systems, and more active resting brain metabolism than people who sleep well. The assumption that insomniacs are simply worrying too much about sleep misses the depth of this physiological signature. The heightened alertness is real, measurable, and consistent. A nervous system that has become chronically tuned to vigilance in ways that resist easy reassurance. The relationship between insomnia and mental health is bidirectional and worth understanding. Insomnia significantly increases the likelihood of developing depression and anxiety. But depression and anxiety also significantly increase the likelihood of insomnia. Each can perpetuate the other in a cycle that can feel difficult to step out of from the inside. This does not mean the cycle is permanent or unbreakable. It means that addressing sleep is often genuinely restorative, not just for how it feels the next day, but for the longer arc of emotional well-being over time. Sleep is not separate from mental health. In many ways, It is its foundation. The most effective non-medication treatment for chronic insomnia, as endorsed by major medical organizations, is a structured approach called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, abbreviated CBTI. Meta-analyses published in 2024 and 2025, drawing on data from tens of thousands of participants across hundreds of studies, consistently find that CBTI produces meaningful, durable improvements in sleep, often comparable to medication in the short term, but with effects that tend to persist and even continue improving after treatment ends. The premise of CBTI is quietly elegant. Insomnia is not simply a chemical imbalance or a neurological deficit. It is, in large part, a learned pattern, and learned patterns can be gradually, gently unlearned. Let's pause here and notice your body. As you breathe out slowly, appreciate each quiet system working inside. Right now, your brain is doing something it could not do while you were busy living the day. It is sorting, filing, releasing what is no longer needed. Notice the gentle weight of your body in this moment. The places where you make contact with the surface beneath you, the small rise and fall of your chest. Your nervous system is listening for safety, and there is safety here. Now we continue. CBTI works through a combination of approaches that are worth understanding, not as prescriptions, but as windows into how the mind and sleep interact. One core component is called stimulus control. Over time, a bed that has been used for long, wakeful hours, for thinking, for worrying, for watching screens, begins to function as a cue for wakefulness rather than sleep. The brain has simply learned that this particular place is associated with alertness. Stimulus control involves gradually reassociating the bed with sleep by reducing the activities that pair it with the awake state. The bedroom, gently and over time, becomes a place the nervous system recognizes as safe for letting go. Sleep restriction, another component of CBTI, initially seems counterintuitive. It involves temporarily limiting the amount of time spent in bed to closely match the actual amount of sleep being obtained, with the goal of intensifying sleep pressure and rebuilding the consolidation and depth of sleep cycles. Reducing time in bed, paradoxically, often improves the quality of the sleep that does occur. As sleep efficiency improves, time in bed is gradually extended. This approach has strong research support, though it requires guidance and patience. The counterintuitive nature of it reflects something deeper about sleep. The harder you try to force it, the more it resists. Rest is not a goal that can be pursued directly. Cognitive restructuring, the third major pillar of CBTI, addresses the thoughts about sleep that develop alongside insomnia. When nights become difficult, the mind begins to build beliefs around sleep, that a bad night will ruin the next day, that not sleeping carries lasting consequences, that there is something deeply wrong. These beliefs are not irrational. They emerge from real experience, but they also perpetuate the cycle, because anticipatory concern raises arousal before bed, making sleep harder to achieve. Gently examining and softening these beliefs, not pretending they are untrue, but exploring them with a lighter touch, is part of what allows the nervous system to begin to lower its guard. One of the oldest and most consistent findings in sleep research is the relationship between body temperature and sleep onset. As evening arrives, the body begins cooling from the inside, a process regulated by the circadian clock and assisted by the dilation of blood vessels in the skin. This cooling continues through the early hours of sleep. Deep sleep tends to occur when core temperature is at its lowest point. Exercise can both help and complicate this process. Regular physical activity during the day or early evening improves sleep quality over time. But vigorous exercise close to bedtime can delay the onset of temperature cooling and push back sleep onset. The body, like most things, prefers gradual transitions. Light is the most powerful external regulator of the circadian clock. The specialized light-sensitive cells at the back of the eye that inform the brain's biological clock respond especially strongly to short-wavelength blue light, the kind found in daylight and in the screens of most electronic devices. Exposure to bright light in the morning advances the circadian rhythm, helping people feel more alert earlier in the day. Exposure to bright light in the evening delays the rhythm, signaling that the day is still ongoing. The simple act of getting morning light, even through a window, is one of the most grounded ways to anchor the body's internal clock and improve the regularity of sleep. The circadian clock runs on a cycle that is, in most people, slightly longer than 24 hours, closer to 24 hours and 12 minutes on average. This means that without daily time cues from the environment, primarily light, the clock would gradually drift later and later each day. The fact that it does not, in most circumstances, reflects how effectively the body synchronizes itself to its world. Light exposure is the primary timekeeper. Meal timing, physical activity, and social schedules also play minor roles. Remove all of these cues, as has been done in research settings using deep caves or specially designed windowless rooms, and the clock continues to run, but begins to wander. Chronotypes describe the natural variation in people's preferred timing for sleep and wakefulness. They are biologically real, driven by genetics, age, and sex. Children tend toward earlier timing. Adolescents shift sharply toward later timing, a change that peaks around 17 to 19 years of age and is a genuine biological shift, not simply a preference for staying up. Adults, across the lifespan, are distributed across a range, from genuine early types to genuine late types. Research has found that maintaining a schedule misaligned with one's chronotype carries measurable costs in cognitive performance, mood, and metabolic health. A large study published in 2024 found that night owl patterns, particularly in adults, were associated with less favorable mental health outcomes, even when accounting for other factors. Social jet lag is a term researchers use to describe the chronic misalignment between a person's biological clock and their social schedule. Most commonly, it describes the experience of sleeping later on weekends than on weekdays, a pattern that can involve a shift of 2 or more hours and that affects a substantial portion of the adult population. The experience mirrors the effects of traveling across time zones, hence the jet lag analogy, and repeated studies have found it associated with fatigue, reduced cognitive performance, and metabolic disruption. It is a reminder that consistency in sleep timing may matter as much as duration. The body values regularity. Sudden shifts in schedule are registered as a kind of physiological recalibration. The brain does not simply switch from wakefulness to sleep in a single decisive moment. In recent years, Researchers have found evidence suggesting that sleep and wakefulness can coexist locally. Different regions of the brain slipping into sleep-like states while others remain alert. This phenomenon has been observed in birds, who can sleep with one hemisphere while keeping the other active. In humans, local sleep appears to underlie some of the perceptual lapses that occur during sleep deprivation. The brain taking brief, unauthorized pauses in specific regions, even while the overall system maintains behavioral wakefulness. It is a striking demonstration that sleep is not all or nothing. Microsleeps are brief, involuntary episodes of sleep lasting from a fraction of a second to 30 seconds, occurring in people who are sleep-deprived, often without their awareness. During a microsleep, the eyes may remain open and the person may appear awake, but sensory processing is effectively suspended. Microsleeps are worth understanding in any context requiring sustained attention, as they represent genuine gaps in awareness that occur independent of intention. They are one of the mechanisms most associated with fatigue-related lapses in driving and other focused tasks. The unsettling quality of microsleeps is that those experiencing them typically do not know they are happening. Animals have evolved a remarkable range of approaches to sleep. Dolphins and some whales practice unihemispheric sleep. One hemisphere of the brain sleeps, while the other remains active, allowing them to continue swimming and surfacing to breathe. Some birds do the same during long migratory flights, sleeping with one eye open. Migratory birds have also been found to reduce total sleep dramatically during migration seasons, with seemingly reduced behavioral consequences compared to similar reduction at other times of year. These discoveries reveal that the mechanisms and requirements of sleep are more flexible across evolution than was once believed. Though humans, with our particular brain architecture, appear to require both hemispheres resting together. Sleep apnea, a condition in which the airway repeatedly narrows during sleep, causing brief interruptions in breathing, affects an estimated 30 million adults in the United States, though many remain undiagnosed. Each interruption is brief, but sufficient to fragment the sleep architecture, preventing adequate time in deep and REM stages. The cumulative effect on cognitive function, cardiovascular health, and daytime alertness can be substantial over time. It is also, and this is worth knowing, highly treatable. The connection between sleep quality and overall health is particularly clear in sleep apnea, where addressing the physical cause often produces meaningful improvements across many dimensions of well-being. The amount of sleep most adults need has been consistently estimated at 7 to 9 hours per night. This range comes from decades of research on performance, cognitive function, metabolic health, and longevity. Research has found that people who habitually sleep fewer than 6 hours often show measurable cognitive differences. But, gently worth noting, they frequently stop perceiving themselves as affected. The sensation of having adapted to less sleep is one of sleep science's most quietly meaningful findings. The adjustment appears to happen in the feeling of sleepiness, not in the underlying function. The brain, in a sense, loses its most accurate read of its own state. Napping has a thoughtful relationship with nighttime sleep. Brief naps of 20 to 30 minutes, sometimes called power naps, can restore alertness, improve mood, and support certain kinds of memory performance, particularly early in the afternoon, when the body's circadian rhythm produces a natural dip in wakefulness. Longer naps that include slow-wave sleep can provide deeper restoration, but may also reduce the buildup of adenosine sleep pressure, making it harder to fall asleep at night. The context matters. For someone who is chronically sleep insufficient, napping provides genuine benefit. For someone trying to consolidate their nighttime sleep, carefully timed short naps may be helpful, while longer or later naps may not. One of the most elegant aspects of sleep science is how it reveals that the body already knows how to sleep. The machinery is in place. The chemistry exists. The architecture is encoded in the nervous system at a depth that predates civilization. What often disrupts sleep in modern life is not a deficit in this machinery, but a layering of habits, expectations, and environmental signals that make it harder for the natural process to begin. This realization is, in some ways, one of the most reassuring findings in the field. Sleep is not something you need to acquire or manufacture. It is something you already have. Much of what helps is simply learning to stop interfering with it. You're still here, still listening, still drifting through these quiet corridors of sleep science with me. Take a slow breath. Notice how your body feels right now. A little softer than it did an hour ago. Perhaps a little less organized. We're exploring the sleeping mind together. You and I and everyone else lying in the quiet dark tonight. There's nowhere to go. No question you need to answer. Just the gentle current of these facts, carrying us forward. Let's continue. Emotions and sleep are deeply intertwined. Research consistently shows that sleep deprivation makes emotional responses more intense and less easy to regulate. But the relationship also works in the other direction. The emotional experiences of the day shape the quality and character of the night's sleep that follows. Stress hormones, like cortisol, which rise during demanding experiences, can delay sleep onset, reduce deep sleep, and increase the number of brief awakenings during the night. The day and the night are not separate containers. They bleed into each other through the chemistry of the nervous system. One of the functions proposed for REM sleep is what some researchers describe as overnight emotional processing. During REM, levels of norepinephrine, a neurochemical linked to stress and threat responses, fall to some of the lowest levels in the 24-hour cycle. This may create a neurochemical window in which the brain can access and revisit emotional memories in a relatively calmer internal environment. The hypothesis suggests that dreaming is not simply a byproduct of memory consolidation, but may serve a specific function in softening the emotional weight of difficult experiences over time, gently reprocessing the day's feelings in a context that reduces their charge. This remains an active and meaningful area of investigation. Sleep loss has a particularly clear relationship with sustained attention, the kind required for careful reading, focused work, or any task that asks the mind to hold a single thread for an extended period. Even moderate reduction in sleep over several weeks produces deficits in this kind of attention that are measurable in laboratory settings, even when the person no longer notices them subjectively. Sustained attention appears to be among the most sensitive cognitive capacities to sleep insufficiency, degrading earlier and more substantially than many other functions. The mind that has slept well can hold a thought, return to the same point, follow a sequence. The mind working with less simply manages as best it can. Stress and sleep exist in a self-reinforcing cycle. Stress activates a chain of signals that results in the release of cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone. Elevated cortisol disrupts sleep architecture, reducing slow-wave sleep and increasing arousal during the night. Poor sleep, in turn, sensitizes the stress response system, making the brain more reactive to stressors the following day. Each element can amplify the other. Understanding this cycle does not require finding a single starting point to address. It opens the possibility of gently stepping in at multiple places. Sleep habits, relaxation, perspective, movement, all of which have research support behind them. The gut and the brain communicate continuously through a network of neurons lining the digestive tract, through hormonal signals, and through the enteric nervous system, which is so extensive it is sometimes described informally as a second nervous center. In 2025, researchers from Washington State University published work suggesting that bacterial molecules naturally present in the gut may influence sleep regulation directly. That certain components of bacterial cell walls are found in the brains of sleeping mammals in ways that correlate with sleep cycles. The discovery adds a new dimension to our understanding of what drives sleep, suggesting that the microorganisms living inside us may be quietly shaping the rhythms of our rest. Pain and sleep have a particularly layered relationship. Pain disrupts sleep, reliably and significantly. It fragments the architecture, reduces deep sleep, and increases nighttime awakenings. But poor sleep also lowers the threshold for experiencing pain. People who are sleep insufficient report higher levels of pain from the same stimuli. This is thought to involve changes in the brain's descending pain modulation pathways, the systems that regulate how much pain signals are amplified or quieted before they reach conscious awareness. Improving sleep in people with chronic pain often produces meaningful reductions in pain experience. Not because sleep cures the underlying condition, but because it restores the brain's natural capacity to modulate its own signals. Sleep plays a role in immune function that is now supported by many lines of evidence. During sleep, particularly deep, slow-wave sleep, the body increases the production and activity of certain immune cells. People who are sleep insufficient show reduced antibody responses to vaccines and greater susceptibility to respiratory viruses. One notable study found that people sleeping fewer than 6 hours per night were significantly more likely to become ill when experimentally exposed to a rhinovirus than those sleeping 7 or more hours. Sleep is not a passive state for the immune system. It is one of the conditions under which the immune system does some of its most meaningful work. Growth hormone, which plays a central role in tissue repair and cellular maintenance throughout the body, is released in its largest pulse of the day during the first bout of deep, slow-wave sleep, typically within the first hour or two after sleep onset. This is one of the reasons that sleep quality matters as much as sleep duration. Fragmented sleep that repeatedly interrupts slow-wave sleep may reduce growth hormone release even if total time asleep is adequate. The body's restorative agenda is concentrated in that early, deep sleep window. Allowing that window to arrive undisturbed is one of the quieter gifts a good night offers. Alcohol is one of the most commonly used substances to ease the approach to sleep, and one of the least understood in terms of its actual effects on sleep quality. Alcohol does reduce the time it takes to fall asleep, which is why the association between alcohol and rest persists. But it significantly disrupts REM sleep, particularly in the second half of the night. It also acts as a diuretic and tends to produce rebound awakenings as it is metabolized. The sleep that follows alcohol is often lighter, more fragmented, and less restorative than sleep without it. A quiet discrepancy between the feeling of having rested and the biological reality of what the sleeping brain was able to accomplish. We are at the midpoint of our journey through sleep science tonight. And what we have seen so far is something worth sitting with for a moment. Sleep is not simply the absence of waking. It is one of the most biologically active, chemically precise, neurologically sophisticated things that the human body and brain do. It is ancient in its origins, essential in its effects, and deeply sensitive to the conditions of the life lived around it. The difficulty of sleep in modern life is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of how much the brain is carrying, how much alertness it has been asked to maintain, how much stimulation it has absorbed, how many signals it has received that the world is demanding and never quite still. And imagine for a moment, your body has been doing this, sleeping, resting, cycling through its stages for your entire life, long before you had words for it, long before you thought about it at all. Every cell in your body has been part of this rhythm, night after night, year after year. Right now, in this room, in this quiet, the same ancient process is beginning again. It doesn't need your help. It only needs your permission. Let this moment be part of the long, unbroken line of all the nights you have rested. And we continue. The brain's default mode network is a set of interconnected regions that become active when the mind is not focused on external tasks. During daydreaming, mind wandering, and during parts of sleep. This network, once thought to simply reflect the brain idling, is now understood to be involved in self-referential thinking, future planning, memory consolidation, and emotional processing. It is most active during REM sleep. The default mode network may be one of the structures through which sleep performs its integrative function, weaving together the experiences of the day with the longer story of who we are. Dreams are generated primarily during REM sleep, though some dreamlike mental activity occurs in other stages as well. The content of dreams draws on memories, emotions, concerns, and images from waking life, but combines them in ways that waking logic would not produce. The brain during REM has reduced activity in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for critical thinking and self-awareness, which may help explain why the unusual logic of dreams is accepted so readily within them. We rarely question the impossible while we are inside it. The question of why we dream remains one of the genuinely open questions in neuroscience. Hypotheses range from emotional processing and threat simulation to memory consolidation and the random activation of neural circuits that the narrative-generating brain simply weaves into story. It is very likely that dreams serve multiple purposes simultaneously. What seems clear is that people deprived of REM sleep, either through shortened nights or through substances that suppress this stage, often experience what is called REM rebound when they sleep freely. The brain allocates substantially more time to REM on recovery nights, as if returning to work that was interrupted. The sleeping brain is not simply recording or filing experience. It appears to be actively seeking patterns. Research using tasks involving hidden rules or sequences has found that people are more likely to discover a shortcut or underlying structure in the problem if they sleep after learning the basic elements, compared to remaining awake. This insight generation during sleep has been observed across many kinds of problems. Scientists sometimes describe it as the sleeping brain working at the level of abstraction that waking problem-solving rarely achieves. Finding relationships not between individual memories, but between categories and patterns. The hours just before waking, when REM sleep dominates, may be particularly meaningful for emotional and creative processing. This is, in many ways, the most cognitively integrative part of the night. It is also the most frequently shortened. An alarm cutting the night short typically interrupts a period of REM sleep. Over many nights, the cumulative effect of this interruption is not trivial. The mind that wakes before it has completed its REM work may carry more unprocessed emotional content into the day, and may have less access to the lateral, integrative thinking that this stage seems to support. The relationship between sleep and learning is strong enough that it has begun to influence research in education. Studies have found that sleeping after a learning session before being tested produces better retention than remaining awake. The timing of sleep relative to learning also matters. Sleep that occurs closer to the learning event tends to produce better outcomes for certain types of memory. Adolescents, whose circadian rhythms are biologically shifted toward later sleep, and who are also in a significant developmental window for learning, may be disproportionately affected by early school start times, a concern that has increasingly influenced education policy discussions. Sleep deprivation affects not just what we remember, but the reliability of what we perceive as having happened. Research has found that sleep-insufficient people are more inclined to form false memories, misremembering events, accepting misleading information, and feeling confident in recollections that are inaccurate. The tired mind fills gaps less carefully, accepts suggestion more readily, and has reduced capacity to distinguish between what actually happened and what the brain constructed around incomplete information. This is not a character flaw. It is a consequence of the neurological resources required for accurate memory retrieval being reduced by fatigue. One of the more humbling findings in sleep science is how reliably people underestimate their own state when sleep insufficient. In deprivation research, participants who have been kept awake for extended periods or given insufficient sleep over multiple nights consistently rate themselves as only moderately affected, while objective measures of reaction time, working memory, and attention show deficits that are substantial. The feeling of having adapted to less sleep is one of the most consistent patterns the tired brain produces. The adaptation is not in the performance. It is in the absence of distress about the performance. The Stanford Sleep Medicine Center, founded in 1970, was among the first institutions to systematically study sleep as a medical and scientific field. By 2025, researchers there had assembled one of the largest collections of sleep study data in the world. More than 35,000 patients recorded over decades, enabling the application of artificial intelligence to patterns in sleep that no individual clinician could detect. Among the findings emerging from this kind of large-scale analysis is the idea of a sleep age, a measure of how old the brain appears to be based on its sleep architecture, which may differ significantly from a person's actual age. Sleep, it turns out, leaves traces that science is only beginning to read. The amount of time spent in slow-wave sleep generally declines with age, beginning in early adulthood and continuing gradually through the lifespan. Older adults sleep less deeply, wake more frequently, and spend proportionally less time in the restorative stages that were easy in youth. Whether this is simply a feature of aging, a contributor to cognitive change, or something that can be meaningfully supported, is a question researchers are actively investigating. What is known is that the quality of sleep across the decades bears a relationship to brain health that extends well beyond feeling rested. Sleep may be one of the most accessible factors in how the brain ages. The discovery that poor sleep was associated with measurable brain age acceleration came from combining large-scale brain imaging with detailed sleep assessment. A 2025 review drawing on cohorts of more than 25,000 people found that suboptimal sleep, whether too short, too fragmented, or of poor quality, independently predicted 1 to 3 years of additional brain age acceleration, even after accounting for other health factors. This finding adds precision to something researchers had long suspected: that sleep quality is not simply a reflection of brain health, but an active participant in shaping it. Insomnia and cognitive health share a relationship that researchers are still carefully mapping. A large study published in 2025, following more than 2,700 cognitively healthy older adults for an average of nearly 6 years, found that those with chronic insomnia were approximately 40% more likely to develop mild cognitive impairment or dementia over the study period. Those who also reported sleeping less than usual showed cognitive scores roughly comparable to being approximately 4 years older. These findings suggest an association, not a proven causal chain, but one that strengthens the case for treating insomnia as something worth addressing for long-term brain health, not just for the quality of each individual night. The link between sleep and long-term brain health involves more than one pathway. Sleep disruption may affect the health of small blood vessels in the brain, contributing to what are called white matter hyperintensities. Small areas of tissue change visible on brain scans. It may also be connected to the accumulation of amyloid proteins associated with Alzheimer's pathology, and it affects the inflammatory state of the brain more broadly. With sustained sleep insufficiency associated with markers of low-grade neurological inflammation over time, the brain that rests well is a brain living with less of this cumulative burden. There is something quietly reassuring in the latest research on sleep and brain health. The evidence that poor sleep is associated with brain aging, while worth understanding, also implies that improving sleep may be protective. Sleep is, unlike genetic inheritance or environmental exposure early in life, something that can change. The brain responds to better sleep relatively readily. Cognitive function improves. Emotional regulation improves. Inflammatory markers shift. The brain is plastic, and sleep is one of the conditions under which that plasticity is most actively expressed. Exercise has a well-documented relationship with sleep quality, particularly for people with insomnia. Regular aerobic activity, walking, swimming, cycling, consistently appears in research as associated with improved sleep onset, increased time in deep slow wave sleep, and reductions in nighttime awakenings. The mechanisms are multiple. Exercise gently reduces cortisol over time, raises core body temperature in ways that facilitate subsequent cooling and sleep onset, and contributes to adenosine buildup that supports appropriate sleep pressure. The overall evidence suggests that a body that moves during the day tends to sleep better at night. The effects of temperature on sleep extend beyond the general cooling principle. The optimal room temperature for sleep in most adults falls roughly between 65 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit. At temperatures above or below this range, the brain tends to spend more time in lighter sleep stages, and the number of awakenings increases. This is thought to relate to the body's thermoregulation during sleep. Maintaining internal temperature within a narrow range requires less effort when the surrounding environment is not extreme. Sleep in a room that is too warm is often lighter, more fragmented, and less subjectively satisfying. Sound affects sleep architecture even when it does not fully wake a person. Research using continuous sound monitoring during sleep has found that environmental noise, traffic, urban background sound, even intermittent soft sounds, can shift the brain out of deep sleep into lighter stages without producing full awakenings. The sleeper remains asleep, but the quality of sleep changes. This helps explain why people who live in noisier environments often report sleeping through the night, but waking unrefreshed. The body spent less time in restorative stages. Even if total sleep time appears intact, light levels in the sleeping environment have become one of the more meaningful environmental influences on sleep in the modern world. Artificial light that fills cities, streams through windows, and illuminates bedrooms can delay the circadian clock, reduce melatonin secretion, and shift the timing of sleep later. Studies comparing sleep in urban versus rural environments consistently find that people in brighter nighttime environments fall asleep later, sleep less, and report lower sleep quality. The body was calibrated for a world in which darkness arrived reliably after sunset. A sleeping environment that supports darkness simply works with that calibration rather than against it. Mindfulness-based approaches to insomnia have accumulated a modest but growing body of evidence. Practices that involve cultivating a non-judgmental, present-moment awareness, particularly when applied to the experience of lying awake, appear to reduce the cognitive arousal and distress that sustain wakefulness. One of the core insights from this work is that the suffering of insomnia often involves not just the wakefulness itself, but the resistance to it. The urgency, the self-criticism, the mental rehearsal of consequences. A gentler relationship to the experience of not sleeping can, over time, soften the physiological state that produces it. Heart rate variability, a measure of the variation in time between heartbeats, is closely linked to sleep quality. High heart rate variability, which reflects healthy parasympathetic nervous system activity, is associated with deeper, more restorative sleep. Low heart rate variability, associated with chronic stress and sympathetic nervous system dominance, tends to accompany lighter, more fragmented sleep. The relationship is circular. Poor sleep reduces heart rate variability, and reduced heart rate variability makes deep sleep harder to sustain. Sleep, stress, and cardiovascular health are interconnected at the level of basic physiology, a single network rather than separate systems. There is a quiet way to understand how much the resting brain matters. Researchers comparing sleep-deprived subjects with those given measured amounts of alcohol found that after 17 to 19 hours of wakefulness, cognitive performance declined to roughly the same degree as at a blood alcohol concentration of 0.05. After a full day without sleep, 24 hours, that decline deepened to roughly 0.10, which is above the legal limit for driving in the United States. This is offered not as alarm, but as a measure of what the rested brain quietly does for us. Every ordinary day, simply by having had the chance to sleep. The sleeping brain is not simply consolidating memory, it is also pruning it. One of the established models of sleep function proposes that the synaptic connections strengthened during waking are selectively downscaled during sleep, consolidating what matters and gently releasing the synaptic accumulation of experiences that do not need to be retained at full strength. Where memory consolidation moves information forward, this process edits what has been filed, maintaining the signal-to-noise ratio of the brain's storage. The sleeping brain is not just archiving the day, it is editing it. Teenagers are genuinely biologically different in their sleep needs and timing compared to adults. The adolescent brain undergoes a circadian phase delay, a shift toward later sleep and wake times that is driven by changes in hormonal and neural development. This is not a preference or a lifestyle choice. It is a real physiological change, observed across cultures and in some form across other species as well. The mismatch between this biological shift and the early start times of most schools is a legitimate public health consideration. Sleep during adolescence, a period of intensive brain development, carries significance that researchers continue to document carefully. Pregnancy substantially alters sleep architecture. During the first trimester, total sleep time often increases while quality decreases, with more nighttime awakenings and disruption of slow-wave sleep. As pregnancy progresses, physical changes continue to reshape the night. After birth, the sleep disruption of new parenthood is one of the most documented forms of sleep insufficiency in medical literature. Research finding measurable cognitive effects in new parents that can persist longer than most people expect or are prepared for. The body's relationship to sleep changes substantially across the arc of life, and each phase carries its own particular texture. We are now approaching the final quarter of our journey, and what emerges, looking back across these facts, is a picture of sleep not as a simple thing, not merely as rest, but as the condition under which much of what makes us human is maintained, repaired, and renewed. The brain that processes emotion, the memory that holds identity, the judgment that guides action, the immune system that guards the body, all depend on sleep in ways that are specific and measurable. The person who struggles with sleep is not failing at something easy. They are navigating an intricate system with enormous precision in a world that was not designed to support it. And in finding their way here tonight, they are already doing something right. You might be feeling softer now, a little further from the day. That's exactly right. Your heart has been beating all this time without your guidance. Your lungs have been filling and emptying. Your nervous system has been slowly, gently shifting toward the state it has been preparing for all day long. The process doesn't need your help. It only needs the space you're giving it now. Let your breath deepen just a little. Let the weight of this moment be enough. We're almost there. The word insomnia comes from the Latin in, meaning without, and somnus, meaning sleep. Without sleep, it is one of the oldest named conditions in medicine. Ancient Egyptians documented sleep disturbance. Greek physicians debated its causes. The Romans wrote remedies for it. In every era, across every culture, the person lying awake while the world rests has been recognized. In many traditions, met with care. The experience you may have carried into this room tonight is not a modern invention. It is as old as the human mind. Sleep conditions beyond insomnia form a wide and varied landscape. Restless leg syndrome, narcolepsy, sleepwalking, REM, sleep behavior disorder, night terrors, circadian rhythm conditions. Each represents a different point of variation in the complex choreography of the sleeping brain. In 2024 and 2025, genetics research has substantially advanced our understanding of these conditions, identifying specific gene variants associated with restless legs syndrome and narcolepsy, and opening pathways toward more targeted and personalized approaches to care. The brain's default relationship to sleep is one of readiness. Sleep is not a system that needs to be built or invented each night. It is a system that needs to be allowed. The elaborate preparations some people develop, the rituals, the remedies, the conditions, often reflect not a broken system but an anxious one. The irony is that trying very hard to sleep is among the more effective ways of delaying it. The monitoring, the checking, the evaluating, all increase arousal at precisely the moment the brain needs to disengage. Sleep favors inattention. It arrives most easily when it is not being watched. One of the gentler discoveries in sleep science is the power of expectation. In a number of studies, people told that they had slept well, even when their sleep had been moderate, performed better on subsequent cognitive tasks than those told they had slept poorly. This is not simply suggestion. It reflects something real about how the mind's model of its own state influences its actual state. One imperfect night is rarely as consequential as the anxiety it generates. Sleep science offers permission, gently and firmly, to hold difficult nights more lightly. Across cultures, sleep has held meaning beyond rest. Historical accounts of segmented sleep, in which people slept in two distinct periods, with a quiet, wakeful interval in between, suggest that the single consolidated 8-hour block may not be the only natural pattern for the human body. Historical records suggest that before artificial light, many people slept in a first sleep and a second sleep, separated by an hour or two of gentle, quiet wakefulness. The relationship between human consciousness and the night has always been more varied than a simple binary of asleep and awake. Dreaming is a form of experience. Every night, the sleeping brain creates an interior world populated with people, places, events, and emotions. A world that is fully convincing in the moment of its occurrence. Research exploring dream content systematically has found that it draws heavily on themes that matter to the dreamer. Relationships, unresolved concerns, emotional questions. These appear in dreams with greater frequency than neutral content. The dreaming mind is not random. It is, in some sense, working on what matters. Lucid dreaming, the state in which a dreamer becomes aware that they are dreaming while remaining within the dream, has been verified scientifically using prearranged eye movement signals. Lucid dreamers in sleep laboratories have communicated with researchers from within the dream state. The neural signature of lucid dreaming involves increased activity in the prefrontal cortex, the very region that is normally quieted during REM sleep, suggesting that the dreamer has partially restored their capacity for self-awareness. It is a narrow opening between waking and dreaming through which the self can, briefly, observe itself. The need for sleep is present in every human genome that has ever been examined. There are no populations adapted to sleeping dramatically less than others. There are individuals, an extremely small number, with a rare genetic variant that allows them to function on about 6 hours of sleep without apparent deficit. But these people are exceptions so rare as to be essentially statistical curiosities. For the vast majority of human beings, across every culture and every era of recorded history, adequate sleep is not negotiable. It is as foundational as water. The quality of waking attention depends heavily on what happened in the sleeping hours that preceded it. Sustained attention, the kind required for focused work, careful reading, or safe driving, is among the most sensitive cognitive capacities to sleep loss. The mind that has slept well can hold a thread of thought, follow a sequence, return to the same point without losing it. The mind that has not is constantly performing a kind of invisible triage, choosing what to attend to because it cannot attend to everything. The relationship between sleep and creativity is supported by a consistent body of research. Creative problem solving, finding unexpected connections between disparate elements, approaching familiar problems from new angles, is specifically enhanced by sleep, and particularly by REM sleep. The brain in this state is combining memory fragments in ways that waking logic constrains. Many celebrated examples of creative insight attributed to dreams or the edge of sleep may reflect this genuine quality of the sleeping mind. Insight is not always achieved by working harder. Sometimes it arrives only when the working mind is finally still. Sleep and social behavior are connected in ways that continue to be mapped. Sleep-insufficient people show reduced activity in brain regions associated with empathy and social cognition. They are less accurate at reading the emotional expressions of others. They are more likely to interpret neutral or ambiguous social information as unfriendly. This is not simply a reflection of being tired. It suggests that sleep plays a role in the calibration of the social mind, in the capacity to perceive others accurately and to respond to them with care. One of the most compassionate findings in modern sleep medicine is the validation of the subjective experience of insomnia. For a long time, clinical culture sometimes implied that people with insomnia were simply anxious, that if they could just relax, they would sleep. The neuroscience of the past decade has demonstrated clearly that the hyperarousal of insomnia is a real physiological state, measurable in brain imaging, in cardiovascular signals, in hormonal profiles. The person who cannot sleep is not imagining their difficulty. Their brain is genuinely in a different state. Recognition of this does not solve the problem, but it changes the relationship to it. The transition into sleep is not a sudden threshold, but a gradual dissolution. The brain passes through a succession of states, through the loosening of focused thought, through hypnagogic imagery, through the soft fragmentary narratives of light sleep, before descending into the deeper, slower wave territory of rest. For many people, the most helpful frame is not to try to sleep, but simply to rest, to allow the body to be horizontal, the eyes to be closed, the breath to be easy. Sleep tends to arrive in that space, unbidden. When the conditions are right, it cannot be commanded. It can only be invited. The heart slows during sleep. Blood pressure drops. Breathing becomes rhythmic and regular. The body redistributes blood flow, prioritizing organs engaged in repair and maintenance. This physiological quieting during sleep is one of the reasons that poor sleep is associated with cardiovascular considerations over the long term. The heart and vascular system depend on the nightly reduction in load that healthy sleep provides. Allowing that reduction to happen night after night is one of the quieter ways sleep cares for the body. The sleeping brain cycles through its stages in a rhythm. In the first cycle of the night, The descent through N1, N2, and N3 is deepest and most complete. As the night progresses, cycles shift. N3 becomes shorter. REM lengthens. By the final cycle before waking, REM may last 45 minutes or more. This architectural progression, physical restoration first, psychological integration second, is a kind of nightly priority system. The brain knows what to do. It sequences its work with a precision that no conscious intention could match. The experience of lying awake at night has a particular quality that is different from other kinds of wakeful time. Thought moves differently in the dark. Concerns that feel manageable in daylight can expand in the quiet hours. This is partly a function of the brain's reduced access to external information. Without the flow of sensory input that structures waking thought, the mind turns inward, and inward thought at night often follows more anxious circuits. It is also partly a function of the time itself. 3 in the morning has a quality distinct from 3 in the afternoon. As the brain navigates the hormonal and chemical landscape of its own sleep cycle, the physiological effects of chronic sleep insufficiency accumulate in ways that are not immediately visible. Metabolic markers shift. Inflammatory indicators rise. The regulation of blood sugar becomes less precise. Appetite hormones, specifically the balance between ghrelin, which promotes hunger, and leptin, which signals satiety, are disrupted by insufficient sleep in ways that consistently increase appetite, particularly toward calorie-dense foods. The connection between sleep and metabolic health is now considered one of the more meaningful in preventive medicine. The brain naturally works to protect sleep, particularly slow-wave sleep, from disruption. When external stimuli occur during N3, sounds, light changes, temperature fluctuations, the sleeping brain will often incorporate or suppress them rather than wake. K complexes, those distinctive waves in the sleep signal that occur during N2, are thought to be one mechanism of this protection. Brief events in which the brain processes an incoming stimulus and actively suppresses the arousal response. The sleeping brain is not passive. It is working to maintain its own integrity. There is a quality of thought in the hypnagogic state, the threshold between wakefulness and sleep, that many people recognize. Brief, vivid images that arrive unbidden, thoughts that seem to come from somewhere lateral to ordinary waking cognition, a feeling of ideas arriving rather than being generated. Some of the most integrative thinking of the day may happen in this liminal space. The logical constraints of full waking consciousness are relaxed without the full quieting of awareness that deep sleep brings. It is a narrow, gentle passage, and allowing yourself to drift through it without grasping is one of the oldest ways of letting the night begin. Sleep is one of the most honest measures of how a person is doing, not perfectly predictive, not a simple mirror, but connected, reliably, to the state of the nervous system, the body's stress load, the quality of the days that preceded it. When sleep becomes difficult, it is often the nervous system's first and clearest signal that something in the waking hours is asking for attention, not as a failure, not as a symptom of weakness, but as information. The sleeping brain is trying to tell its waking counterpart something. Sometimes the most helpful thing is simply to listen. The research on what genuinely supports sleep converges on a relatively simple set of principles: consistent timing, rising and going to bed at roughly the same time each day. Light exposure. Morning light to anchor the clock. Reduced light in the evening to allow melatonin's rise. Movement during the day. A sleeping environment that is cool, dark, and quiet. A consistent pre-sleep period that the brain learns to associate with the transition toward rest. And, perhaps most gently, a relationship with sleep that is trusting rather than urgent, that holds sleep as something that naturally arrives, rather than something that must be seized. The science of sleep is still young. The field of modern sleep medicine is less than 80 years old. The discovery of REM sleep came in 1953. The glymphatic system was described in the 2010s. The role of gut microbiota in sleep regulation is still being understood as recently as 2025. What researchers know now is far more than what they knew a generation ago. And what they will know a generation from now will likely be far more again. The sleeping brain remains one of the most generative frontiers in neuroscience. Not because it has yielded little, but because every answer opens deeper questions. The science follows the wonder. You cannot force sleep. This is among the most certain things sleep science has established. Effort is the opposite of what sleep onset requires. The very qualities most associated with wakefulness, vigilance, goal-directedness, active problem solving, are precisely what sleep asks you to relinquish. This is not a paradox without resolution. It is simply an invitation to practice a different relationship with effort. The body knows how to sleep. It has been doing it all your life. What changes with insomnia is not the capacity, but the conditions. The layer of interference that accumulates around a process that, beneath it, remains intact. Rest is not the same as sleep, but it is not without value. Lying quietly with eyes closed, breathing slowly, not demanding anything of the mind. This state activates the parasympathetic nervous system, reduces heart rate, lowers cortisol, and provides some degree of the restoration that full sleep offers. For someone who lies awake for a portion of the night, the quality of the wakefulness matters. Anxious. Activated wakefulness prolongs the cycle. Quiet. Permitted wakefulness, allowed rather than resisted, can sometimes gently tip towards sleep, and even when it does not, is measurably more restorative than struggling against it. The 100 facts we have traveled through tonight describe a mind that is astonishingly capable, persistently working, and, when all conditions allow, naturally inclined toward rest. The brain that struggles to sleep is not broken. It is a brain that has been asked to carry much, in an environment that pulls continuously toward alertness. In a world that undervalues the very process that makes all other processes possible. Sleep is not a luxury. It is not laziness. It is not a performance to succeed or fail at. It is the oldest, most generous thing your body knows how to do. And right now, in this moment, it is quietly waiting for you to allow it. And so, our quiet journey through sleep science comes to a gentle close. We began with adenosine, that patient, invisible molecule building its case all day long, accumulating its quiet argument for rest. We passed through the architecture of the cycling night, the slow waves of deep sleep, the vivid interior worlds of REM. We touched the relationship between sleep and memory, sleep and emotion, sleep and the long-term health of the brain, that carries all your days. We discovered that the difficulty of sleep in modern life is not a personal failing, but a physiological reality navigated by an ancient system in a world that was not built to accommodate it. And somewhere in all of those facts, perhaps, there was one that arrived softly and stayed. Sleep reminds us that the most fundamental things do not require effort to exist, only permission. The brain already knows the way. The chemistry is already in motion. The night has been preparing this space for you for as long as you have been alive. Much of what the sleeping brain does happens in silence, beneath awareness, in chemistry and slow electrical waves that ask nothing of you but your trust. By pausing to understand, we glimpse the extraordinary intelligence of the biology we carry. In these final minutes, take the deepest breath you can, as deep as possible. Think about unity of every sleeping brain tonight, in every corner of the world, cycling through its stages in the dark. Billions of minds, each one doing the same ancient work. You are not the only one lying here. You are part of the largest, quietest gathering there is. Let your entire being dissolve into the gentle dark, into the slow tide of your own breathing, into the soft gravity of the night pulling you inward. Prepare for deep sleep. No boundaries left, only peace. For anyone who found a little rest tonight in these quiet facts, a gentle like or subscribe helps another sleepless mind discover this space. One quiet tap, one sleepy soul at a time. But there's no need to do anything now. Nothing at all. You've traveled far tonight. Not across miles, but across layers. Through the chemistry of fatigue, through the architecture of stages, through the extraordinary quiet intelligence of the brain that never truly stops caring for you. Even while you rest, you can allow these thoughts of sleep and science to fade now, like the hypnagogic images that arrive at the edge of sleep, present for a moment, then dissolving into something softer, leaving only the deep, still calm behind. Let your breathing deepen. Let your body feel heavier, as if every last effort of the day is being gently released, is simply setting itself down. If sleep comes, let it carry you the way the night itself carries the world. Not abruptly, not urgently, but in its own time, in its own way, inevitable and unhurried. If your eyes are still open, the next video is waiting for you, ready to continue the journey. But if they're closed, stay there. Stay in the darkness that feels safe and warm. Tomorrow, the adenosine will begin its patient build-up again. The circadian clock will continue its ancient rhythm. The brain will do what it has always done. But tonight belongs to stillness. Rest well, sleepy soul, and remember, the brain that cannot stop working is the same brain that built, in the quiet dark, everything you know and love and are. Good night.